For a great portion of his childhood, my father, Walt Rotkus, and his family were constantly moving around. Today, he answers a few questions and tells a story about his childhood, what it was like growing up with a military officer as a father, and how those experiences made him the man he is today. Can you tell me a little bit about your family, the traditions you shared, and a few of your favorite stories?
I had one sibling. He was 15 months younger than I am. Whenever we got in a fight, since I was bigger, I'd win, but then he would kind of come back because he was meaner.
In what way?
Oh, he'd bite or scratch or. So anyway, that, and then my dad was an officer in the military, and we moved a lot. Family tradition, my dad's family was pretty small, and in fact his brother, my uncle on his side, died at a young age, and his sister didn't speak English, so we weren't very close to those cousins. My mother had a big family, and we used to, when the years that we were in the United States, we used to have a big family reunion, usually in northern Michigan. My dad was religious, and we used to go to church every Sunday. Christmas, we used to go to midnight mass, and we loved it as kids because when we got home, on Christmas Eve at 1 o'clock, we got to open one or two presents, and that was always a fun time. Other than that, we didn't have a lot of traditions.
What were your responsibilities as a child?
Mom, most of the time I was growing up, worked as a teacher. And so in an effort to make her life easier, my brother, my father, and myself took turns making breakfast for the three of us. So that was kind of our daily things. And then every weekend we were responsible. We had chores, we had to clean the house, vacuum the entire house, do the bathrooms, mow the lawn, work in the yard. So as kids, pretty much every Saturday we had a bunch of stuff to do.
Where did you grow up?
I was born in New York City, and after that we moved, anywhere from every 1 to 3 years. So I went from New York City, we went from New York City to Florida, to Pittsburgh, to Texas, to Tokyo, to Washington, D.C., to France. After we were in France, I went to college, and while I was in college, my dad was stationed in Las Vegas and then in California.
Wow. Well, since you moved around a lot, was there any particular place that you considered home?
It's kind of weird, every time we moved, I think we all kind of liked where we lived, and my dad always, we often bought a house and we didn't sell it because we kept thinking we'd go back.
It must have been hard moving around all the time as a kid. Through that process, did you become very close to your family? And were you able to, despite moving around all the time, were you able to make a lot of close friends?
It's a good question. I don't think moving necessarily made you closer to your family. I think every time I moved, most of the time I was exposed to kids that were in the exact same situation I was in. It's not infrequently that you would have a best friend that was there for a year and then they'd move. And it would always, or when you left the place, it was always sad. But the good thing is you got to experience a lot of different people and a lot of different things. The other good thing was, in my situation, I would move, and people had no preconceived ideas as to who I was, and so I could kind of recreate myself every time I moved.
Do you think you and your father are similar parents, and how did his strictness reflect upon you?
I think my father and I are very different parents. I think it was a different time, it was a different world, and my father was a career officer, and a good portion of my early life, it was yes sir, no sir, and if he told me to do something, I did it. There was no questioning.
How did his strictness reflect upon you?
I think that the main thing was we were used to taking orders. I think it was much easier to deal with kind of the crazy stuff that you have to do in school, medical school, and the nights on call. And I never really thought of anything besides that this is just something I have to deal with.
Is there a reason that you didn't enforce such strictness on your kids?
Yeah, probably because I wasn't always sure it was the best thing. The difficult thing with being a parent is knowing when to push and when to let people make their own mistakes. I guess because I was pushed so much as a kid with other things that I feel that the motivation has to be inherent or intrinsic in the person.
Are there any specific things that you swore you would never do as a parent?
I saw my father lose his temper and yell at my brother and myself, or clerks or people that in hotels or restaurants that I thought was inappropriate, and I swore I would never do that.
What was it like losing your parents at such a young age?
It was extremely difficult. I remember when my father died very suddenly. It was a shock. That was something that took me a while months, years to get over. And then I swore that when my dad died, I was upset because since he died suddenly, I never got to say what he meant to me. And I swore my mother, I wouldn't do that with my mother. And unfortunately, she also died suddenly, and that discussion never occurred.
How did your parents die?
My dad presumably died of a heart attack. He died suddenly, and I was in medical school, and I was actually doing pathology, and where they did autopsies, where they dissected the body to find out why, and I felt sure that he had probably died of a heart attack, and I didn't want him or his body to go through that. In respect, I wish that would have occurred. My mother died. She had something called Hodgkin's disease, which is a type of lymphoma or leukemia, and is typically very treatable, and she got a urinary tract infection and died very suddenly.
What is, throughout your life, what is the biggest accomplishment that you've made that you wish they could have seen you?
Well, there's lots of them. You guys, I think they would be proud of you. They would have been proud of the fact that I was a doctor and my brother is a doctor. I think those are the main things. And
how you three have turned out.
What do you think defines you, and how did your family influence that?
I would say I've always been pretty self-motivated. I'm always trying to get better. I think there are probably people that have more inherent talent in various things than I do. I don't think there's anyone that works harder than I do. I try to, I've been fortunate, a lot of good things have happened to me. I try to be level-headed and try to remember where I came from.
Though moving around didn't noticeably affect him at the time, we can see that his experiences as a kid had a lasting effect, which has carefully shaped the way he now approaches life. Though his brother grew up in the same family, my father believes that the experiences they derived are worlds apart. However, to this day, the two of them remain close. My father says that he feels extremely fortunate and grateful for the way that everything in his life has turned out. He loves his family, his job, and his life, and he has no regrets.